This isn't a story, it's a file they tried to erase. In the vast silence of space, there are whispers that were never meant to be heard. Voices carried across the stars, captured, and then quietly erased. For decades, NASA has been our window into the unknown, showing us breathtaking images of galaxies, planets, and worlds beyond imagination. But what happens when the camera keeps rolling after the broadcast ends? When transmissions come through that no one can explain, and the recordings mysteriously disappear, there are stories. Old mission logs, fragments of audio, and data files that were supposedly deleted, that tell of strange signals received from the far side of the moon, from empty regions of space where no satellite should be. Astronauts have reported hearing rhythmic pulses, distorted voices, and mechanical sounds echoing through their headsets, even when all communication channels were silent. Some of these recordings leaked before being wiped from official archives, leaving behind just enough to spark suspicion. It's not just about the sounds, though. There were images too, frames that showed odd geometric shadows on lunar surfaces, unexplained lights moving intelligently across the blackness. Technicians claimed they were ordered to clean the feed or erase anomalies. Files were renamed, deleted, replaced, and just like that, entire pieces of history vanished. Why would they hide this? Maybe to protect us from what they found, or maybe to protect their narrative. Perhaps they feared that humanity wasn't ready to face the truth about what's really out there. But truth has a strange way of surviving. Once a signal is sent into the universe, it can't truly be erased. Today, those hidden transmissions remind us that there's more to space exploration than polished press releases and televised landings. Somewhere out there, among the stars, in forgotten archives, in bits of static left behind, are echoes of something extraordinary, waiting to be heard again. And maybe, just maybe, what they tried to delete will one day become the proof we've been waiting for all along. The idea that truth can't be erased has echoed through centuries of human history, and it's never been more relevant than now, in an era when information can be wiped with a keystroke and rewritten at will. Yet, no matter how hard someone tries to bury it, the truth leaves traces, footprints in data, whispers in archives, shadows in the minds of those who saw what they were never meant to see. And nowhere does this idea feel more haunting, more urgent, than in the story of NASA's hidden transmissions. The ones they tried to delete, the ones that refused to stay silent. To understand why the truth can't be erased, we first have to understand what truth actually is. It isn't a single recording, a photograph, or a document stamped, classified. Truth is energy. It vibrates, resonates, and spreads. Once it's released into the world, it transforms. It seeps into memories, it lingers in copies. It embeds itself in the circuits of forgotten servers and the hearts of those who caught a glimpse of something real before it vanished. The more it's suppressed, the stronger its echo becomes. When people sense that something is being hidden, curiosity ignites like fire in dry grass. Secrets may begin in silence, but they rarely end there. In the early years of space exploration, transmissions were sacred. Every beep, every static burst, every coded message from astronauts drifting hundreds of thousands of miles away was a thread connecting Earth to the unknown. Engineers worked tirelessly to capture and record every signal. Nothing was supposed to be lost, but somewhere along the way pieces began to disappear, deleted, redacted, mislabeled. Files were pulled from archives, sometimes without explanation. When questioned, officials called it routine cleanup, bandwidth error, or equipment malfunction. But what if it wasn't? What if some transmissions contained things that challenged our understanding of space, of life, and of what waits beyond the limits of human reach. The truth can't be erased, because even when you destroy the data, you can't erase the memory of those who witnessed it. There were technicians who stayed late after broadcasts, listening to hours of static, when suddenly a pattern emerged, tones repeating in sequences too deliberate to be random. Some described hearing pulses that seemed almost alive, rhythmic, intelligent. When they reported it, they were told to cut the feed, log it as interference, and move on. But those sounds stayed with them, long after the tapes were wiped. Years later, a few spoke out anonymously, saying, "We heard something that wasn't supposed to be there. We don't know what it was, but it wasn't nothing." And that's the power of truth. Once one person speaks, others begin to remember. You can delete a file, but you can't delete human conscience. A single sentence from a whistleblower can undo years of secrecy. That's why, even now, fragments of those lost transmissions keep resurfacing. Snippets of unexplained audio, spectral analysis showing frequencies that shouldn't exist in space. NASA may have moved on. Archives may have been updated. But the data didn't all vanish. Somewhere, someone kept a backup. Somewhere, an old technician kept a reel, a tape, a copy labeled, "Do not play." When we talk about truth, we often think of it as a destination, a final revelation. But in reality, truth is motion. It's alive. It slips through cracks in silence, travels through networks, disguises itself as rumor or myth, until the moment comes to reveal itself again. Every deletion is temporary. Every cover up leaves fingerprints. Every lie carries within it the seed of exposure. That's why history keeps looping back, forcing us to confront the same questions. What did they see out there? What did they hear? And why were we never allowed to know? The idea that truth can't be erased also speaks to something deeper in human nature. We are explorers by instinct, seekers by design. We stare into the night sky not because it's empty, but because it calls to us. Every hidden transmission, every redacted report, every malfunction only fuels our desire to uncover what lies beyond the curtain. The more they try to hide it, the more we want to see it. That's how revolutions begin, not with certainty, but with curiosity. Imagine for a moment that you are in one of those old NASA control rooms in the 1960s. The air hums with electricity. The screens flicker with the glow of data streaming from a spacecraft hundreds of thousands of miles away. Suddenly, a strange frequency appears, an audio signal that doesn't match any expected pattern. It pulses, pauses, and repeats as if trying to form words. The room falls silent. Someone looks up and says, "Are we receiving something?" But just as quickly, the supervisor leans in and says, "Cut that feed. It's not part of the transmission." The room obeys. The moment passes. The tape is erased. But the memory remains. That's truth refusing to die. It doesn't matter if decades pass, or if official archives deny it ever happened. Somewhere in the collective consciousness of humanity, that moment exists. It lingers like an unfinished sentence. The truth can't be erased because it becomes part of who we are, part of the story of how we seek meaning in the infinite. When a government, an agency, or any authority attempts to suppress reality, it only delays the inevitable. You can destroy the evidence, but you can't erase the question. And sometimes, questions are more dangerous than answers. We've seen this pattern across history. Files vanish, witnesses disappear, explanations change, and yet the truth finds new forms. When people say, "There's nothing to see here," the human mind responds, "Then why are you hiding it?" The same curiosity that sent us to the moon and beyond is the same force that keeps us searching for what's been concealed. It's unstoppable. You can silence a broadcast, but you can't silence the desire to know. NASA's missing transmissions are more than just technical mysteries. They are symbols of a deeper conflict between knowledge and control. Science is built on transparency, but power often thrives in secrecy. The two don't coexist easily. When the pursuit of discovery clashes with the need to maintain order, something has to give. Sometimes, the price is truth itself. But even then, truth doesn't disappear. It transforms. It becomes legend, theory, speculation, inspiration. It hides in plain sight, waiting for those who still believe to uncover it. When we talk about hidden transmissions, we aren't just talking about signals from the moon or Mars. We're talking about the essence of what it means to be human. Every civilization, every generation, has faced the same question: how much truth are we willing to see? The records may be gone, but the curiosity remains alive. That's why people still dig through old mission logs, decode mysterious frequencies, and replay fragments of static searching for patterns. It's not just obsession, it's faith. Faith that the universe has something more to say, something worth hearing, even if those in power once tried to silence it. The truth that can't be erased isn't just about space missions. It's about the resilience of human awareness. You can suppress information, but you can't suppress consciousness. Even if every trace of a transmission is deleted, the truth survives in the questions it raised. Why was it removed? Who decided to hide it? What did they fear we'd discover? Each deletion becomes a clue, a paradoxical confirmation that something was there, something important enough to hide. And that's the irony of trying to erase truth. The act of erasure itself becomes evidence. When archives are edited, when logs are lost, when explanations contradict each other, the silence starts to speak louder than any words could. It says, "There was something here once. We don't want you to see it." That whisper fuels generations of seekers who won't stop looking until they find it. In this way, the truth outlives its suppression. It migrates from data to legend, from hidden transmission to human story. We like to think of space as a silent void, but maybe it's not so silent after all. Maybe space itself remembers. Maybe every signal ever sent, every word spoken by astronauts, every deleted message still exists somewhere in the cosmic background, encoded in the radiation that fills the universe. Physics tells us energy can't be destroyed, only transformed. If that's true, then every transmission ever made, even those deleted on Earth, still travels endlessly through space, waiting for someone, somewhere, to hear it again. The truth, quite literally, can't be erased. That idea, that nothing is truly lost, changes everything. It means those mysterious signals that were accidentally deleted still exist, maybe bouncing off asteroids, drifting between galaxies, humming faintly in the cold dark. It means that every voice that was silenced still echoes somewhere, whether in the physical universe or in the human spirit. It means that no matter how hard someone tries to rewrite history, the real story remains, like a watermark beneath the surface. And maybe that's what those hidden transmissions are really about. Not aliens, not conspiracies, but a reflection of ourselves. They remind us that we, too, are transmitters of truth. We send signals into the world every day, our thoughts, our discoveries, our art, our love, our questions. Some of it gets lost, misunderstood, or erased. But somewhere, somehow, it endures. Someone finds it decades later, and it changes them. The universe listens even when no one else does. So when we say, truth can't be erased, we're not just talking about the persistence of data. We're talking about the persistence of meaning. We're talking about the unstoppable force of curiosity, the courage of those who refuse to forget, and the natural law that says, every cause leaves an effect. That's why deleted transmissions resurface, why missing files are rediscovered, and why stories of the unknown never die. Because truth is the one element in existence that resists extinction. Even now, as digital archives expand and governments tighten control over information, people find ways to preserve what matters. A file deleted in one place is mirrored in another. A video removed from one platform is uploaded to 10 more. In the same way, those hidden NASA transmissions, whether fragments of sound, glimpses of light, or mysterious anomalies, continue to exist in the collective digital consciousness. They've become part of a new mythology, one built on real human experience and unanswered questions. And perhaps that's how truth survives, not in perfection, but in persistence. The more they try to erase it, the more it multiplies. Like seeds scattered by the wind, fragments of truth take root wherever there's curiosity to nurture them. Each listener, each reader, each believer becomes a guardian of the pieces that remain. The effort to suppress truth becomes, paradoxically, the fuel that spreads it. Maybe someday, long after we're gone, another generation will stumble upon an ancient digital archive. They'll decode fragments of sound, distorted, distant, but undeniably human, and wonder why they were hidden. They'll ask, what were they afraid of? And in that moment, truth will rise again, unstoppable as light breaking through the dark. So yes, NASA's transmissions may have been deleted. The tapes may be gone. The files may be marked as lost. But truth doesn't live in hardware. It lives in awareness. It travels from one curious mind to another, one question to the next. You can erase data, but not discovery. You can suppress information, but not wonder. You can hide a signal, but not silence its echo. In the end, truth always wins, not because it's protected, but because it's relentless. It waits patiently for the right moment, the right listener, the right spark. And when that moment comes, no amount of deletion, denial, or doubt can stop it from being heard. The universe itself testifies to this. Stars die, yet their light travels on for millions of years. That light is truth. It's the past refusing to disappear. It's proof that even in the vacuum of space, what once was continues to exist. Maybe those lost transmissions are like that, faint beams of truth still moving through the dark, waiting for us to tune in again. Because no matter how deep the silence, no matter how thorough the deletion, truth remains. It survives in echoes, in fragments, in memories, in us. It cannot be destroyed. It can only be hidden, and only for a time. The truth can't be erased, because the universe itself was built to remember. Silence has always had a strange kind of power. It isn't empty. It's full of everything we're not supposed to hear. It's the space between words where the real story hides, the breath before a confession, the pause after a secret is buried. When it comes to the mysteries of space and the missing transmissions we were never meant to know about, silence becomes something even greater. It becomes a message. Because sometimes, what isn't said tells us far more than what is. And in the case of NASA's hidden transmissions, the silence surrounding them speaks louder than any official statement ever could. Silence has texture. It isn't just the absence of sound. It's a presence of intent. When a broadcast suddenly cuts off, when a log entry is redacted, when a public statement skirts around a simple question, that silence vibrates with meaning. It says, "There's something here we can't tell you." It's not the nothingness of ignorance. It's the fullness of secrecy. In every missing minute of recording, every deleted data file, every technical issue that conveniently erases what came before, silence becomes the fingerprint of the truth. Think about the missions that defined the history of human space exploration. The ones that carried humanity's voice into the cosmos. Each transmission was a thread connecting us to the unknown. Every crackle of static, every delay, every heartbeat echoing through a comlink was a reminder that we were reaching beyond our own world. Yet there were moments, rare and unexplained, when those transmissions broke, cut off mid-sentence, mid-breath. The official explanations were simple interference, bandwidth error, signal drop. But for those who were there, listening live, the abrupt quiet didn't sound like technical failure. It sounded like someone turning off the microphone. In those brief silences, something seemed to shift. The air changed. The tension in the control rooms became heavy. Technicians looked to one another, unsure whether to speak. The silence itself became a question, one no one dared to ask out loud. What happened during those missing seconds? What did they hear before the line went dead? And why, when the signal returned, did the voices sound different, measured, cautious, almost rehearsed? That's the power of silence. It leaves room for the imagination to fill in the gaps. And often, what we imagine feels closer to the truth than the official story ever will. Silence draws us in, makes us listen harder, makes us notice every detail around it. The flicker of unease in a scientist's voice, the subtle edits in a released transcript, the way an old recording suddenly disappears from the archive without explanation. These are not random voids, they're deliberate absences. They're the shape truth leaves when it's removed from view. When an organization built on communication suddenly chooses not to speak, that decision itself becomes communication. NASA's silence on certain anomalies, unexplained lights, or mysterious signals says something profound, not necessarily about aliens or conspiracies, but about fear, uncertainty, and control. Because silence, in the language of power, is never accidental. It's strategic. It's the pause that hides panic, the quiet that protects a fragile truth. And yet, silence has a paradoxical quality. The more it's used to hide, the more it reveals. The absence of explanation becomes its own kind of evidence. When you see blank spaces where there should be information, redacted paragraphs where there should be answers, you start to understand that the silence itself is a signpost. It's saying, this is where the story begins. Every missing page is a direction pointing straight toward what matters most. Imagine an engineer working late in a dimly lit control room. The last shift ended hours ago, and he's reviewing telemetry logs from a recent mission. As he scrolls, he notices something odd, a missing timestamp. A few minutes of data simply gone. The file skips, as if those moments never existed. He cross-checks backups, but they're the same. The silence in the record isn't just absence, it's precision. Someone made sure it was clean, seamless, untraceable. That kind of silence doesn't happen by mistake. That's not nature, that's intent. Now imagine the feeling of realizing that the silence you're staring at isn't random noise, but a decision. It's someone's choice to erase a moment from existence. And suddenly, the quiet becomes deafening. Because once you notice the silence, you can't unhear it. It's there, pulsing beneath the surface, louder than any confession. It's saying, pay attention to what's missing. That's why silence is dangerous for those who try to control narratives. It invites curiosity. It demands to be filled. When people sense they're being kept from something, they start looking closer. They rewind the tape, analyze the static, study the patterns in the gaps. In those gaps, they find meaning. They find questions that won't go away. And once questions begin, silence loses its grip. Throughout history, every institution that's tried to maintain total control has relied on silence as its shield. Governments, corporations, agencies, they all know that noise can be managed. But silence can be shaped. It can suggest whatever you want it to suggest. A blank page can be safer than a lie because it doesn't commit. It only conceals. But what they forget is that humans are not wired to accept blankness. We're wired to interpret. Our minds will always fill the silence with possibility. And sometimes, that possibility grows into revelation. In the story of NASA's hidden transmissions, silence plays this exact role. The deleted recordings, the unexplained pauses in mission audio, the statements that begin with, "We can neither confirm nor deny." All of these are forms of controlled silence. But control has limits. The very effort to hide something draws attention to it. The unexplained becomes irresistible. People begin to collect fragments, cross-reference public data, leak internal memos. The silence starts to fracture, and through those fractures, light seeps in. It's ironic, really. Silence is supposed to maintain order, but it often breeds chaos instead. The more you withhold, the louder speculation grows. And speculation, once unleashed, has a life of its own. It spreads through forums, through late-night radio, through documentaries and whispered conversations. It becomes legend, myth, belief. Silence was meant to suppress the story, but it ends up amplifying it. In this way, silence becomes a paradoxical truth teller. It betrays the very secrets it tries to protect. When the recordings from early lunar missions were accidentally erased, people didn't forget. They remembered more vividly than ever. The missing footage became more powerful than the footage that survived. That's what silence does. It sharpens the edges of curiosity, fuels imagination, and turns ordinary questions into eternal mysteries. But there's another layer to this, a human one. Silence is also about fear. Maybe the reason certain transmissions were cut or deleted wasn't to deceive, but to protect. Maybe those in charge feared what humanity might do with information it wasn't ready to handle. Silence can be a form of mercy, too, a way to give the world time to grow into the truth. But mercy disguised as secrecy rarely works. The moment people sense that they're being shielded from something, they stop feeling safe and start feeling controlled. And once control replaces trust, silence stops being protection and starts being oppression. When astronauts spoke of strange experiences, the lights that followed them, the sounds they couldn't explain, the eerie feeling of being watched on the dark side of the moon. Official statements brushed these off as psychological effects or communication glitches. But those who heard the raw transmissions knew there was more. You can't fake the tone of awe, the edge of fear in a human voice. When the recordings were lost or damaged, that silence told the audience everything they needed to know. Because silence that replaces emotion is never neutral. It's a sign that something real was taken away. That's how silence becomes a storyteller. It carries weight. Every missing second of audio, every deleted file, every redacted page becomes a monument to what we're not allowed to see. And those monuments stand tall in the imagination of anyone who believes truth deserves to be heard. Over time, the silence around NASA's hidden transmissions evolved into its own kind of evidence. Proof not of what was said, but of what was suppressed. The absence itself became the message. It's like looking at a photograph that's been carefully cropped. You can't see what's beyond the edges, but you can feel its presence. You sense there's something just outside the frame, something intentionally excluded. That tension, the awareness of the unseen, is what gives the image power. Silence works the same way. It frames the truth without showing it. It leaves space for the mind to wander, to connect dots, to sense patterns that official channels deny. And in that act of sensing, the listener becomes part of the discovery. Silence speaks loudly not because of volume, but because of contrast. When everything else is noise, press releases, media spins, explanations repeated like scripts, the silence stands out. It cuts through the noise like a void too perfect to be accidental. It says, "Look here. This is where the real story hides." The quiet isn't absence, it's direction. It's the compass that points toward the truth. In many ways, silence is also a form of respect. It acknowledges the magnitude of what cannot be easily explained. Perhaps those who chose to withhold certain transmissions weren't acting out of arrogance, but out of humility before the unknown. Maybe they, too, stood in awe of what they encountered, something beyond comprehension, beyond language. And so, instead of trying to explain it, they let silence speak for them. But even then, silence doesn't erase. It amplifies wonder. It invites every listener to feel what words cannot express. Still, silence doesn't stay pure for long. Once bureaucracy, fear, or politics touch it, it turns heavy, manipulative. What began as reverence can become control. What began as awe can become censorship. And that's when silence stops being sacred and becomes suspicious. Because when silence protects truth, it's noble. But when it hides truth, it's corruption. And in those moments, silence betrays itself. Across the decades, the pattern remains. A strange signal appears, then disappears. A photo leaks, then vanishes. A recording surfaces, then gets corrected. Each time, the response is silence, and each time, that silence grows louder. The public begins to listen not to what NASA says, but to what it refuses to say. And slowly, trust shifts. People start to believe the silence more than the words. Because silence, in the end, doesn't lie. It may hide the details, but it reveals the existence of something worth hiding. There's an old saying, the loudest voice in the room is the one that says nothing. That's the essence of this story. When NASA or any institution falls silent at the moment when answers matter most, the quiet becomes thunder. It roars in the minds of those who refuse to forget. It fuels documentaries, investigations, and movements. It becomes legend, passed from one generation of truth seekers to the next. And no matter how many official explanations follow, none ever match the volume of that original silence. That's because silence lingers. Words fade, headlines change, but silence endures. It can't be disproved, can't be argued away. It's eternal. It waits, patient, knowing that sooner or later, someone will come along who listens closely enough to understand what it's been saying all along. Silence speaks loudly because it forces us to listen differently. It trains us to hear the unsaid, to notice the missing. In a world overloaded with information, silence is rare, and rarity gives it value. When the chatter stops, the truth becomes audible. Maybe that's why those hidden transmissions still captivate us today. Not because of what they contained, but because of what their absence implies. Because somewhere between the words, signal lost, and transmission restored, we sense that something extraordinary was spoken, and then silenced. But even that silence can't last forever. The universe, after all, has no walls. Every frequency, every vibration, every whisper released into it keeps traveling, echoing across time and space. Just like energy, truth can't be destroyed. It only changes form. The silence that tried to hide it eventually becomes the resonance that brings it back. The universe itself remembers. So, when we listen to the gaps, when we notice the moments that were cut short, we aren't chasing ghosts. We're honoring the echoes. The silence of those missing transmissions is not a void, it's a pulse. It's telling us, in its own language, that something happened, something real. Something important enough to erase, yet powerful enough to remain. In the end, silence will always betray those who use it to conceal. Because silence, no matter how deep, carries sound within it. The faint hum of truth waiting to be heard again. And the more they try to quiet it, the louder it becomes. For silence, when filled with truth, is the universe's most unbreakable form of speech.